Stephen Interviews You. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Stephen Interviews You. This is the beginning of season 2 of Stephen Interviews You. This is episode number 21. And this is a series where I basically sit down and have a good chat with a very special guest. And his name would be, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Alex Scheer. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks again, Alex, for being on the show. And let's just get right to it. Recently, in the recent past, you and your co-host Graham on the Mac Sports Connection podcast announced that you had your last episode for that podcast, which ran for quite a few years, from 2019 to 2025. Uh, let's just rewind it a little bit. What motivated you to start that podcast to begin with? What was really the start of it?
Yeah, no. So, really, the big thing was this idea that the Mid American Conference has had great coverage from guys like Hustlebelt, who have been writing about the conference since I believe 2012, 2013. Like they've been doing it for a long time. They've done excellent work. But I recognized there was not really a good audio outlet. There was uh, a lot of written content, but nothing really past that. And so when I sat down to kind of come up with the idea of a podcast and what I wanted to do, it was a matter of where do we find the niche? Is it covering all of college football? That's a gargantuan task for just two people. But we were able to really scale it and cover the entire Mid American Conference. And even then, I still don't think we got it right. And anybody who listened to our final episode would hear us kind of talk about how we don't think we got it right 100% of the time, but we certainly gave it our best effort and tried to give everybody out there something quality to listen to about the Mid American Conference.
Yeah. So along the way for the Mac Sports Connection podcast, what were some of the highlights of your time doing that show? What were some of like the most memorable stories that you can remember?
Man, I think it was the first time we had a guest on the show. To me, that was kind of our sign of we're building a little bit of credibility. We had Ricky Stokes, and I'll never forget this. We had Ricky Stokes on in February of 2020, so right before COVID was going to hit. And we had talked to him, and he said, "Yeah, if you guys come out to the basketball championship, we'll meet up. We'll give you a tour of the MAC office, things like that." We make plans to go to the championship, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits and shuts down the tournament. But for us, it was really that first interview with Ricky Stokes, who at the time was the associate commissioner of championships, specifically for basketball championships, and he did an excellent job. He had some great stories. We had no idea what we were doing with bringing on a guest. It was a lot of extra chaos with that. But Ricky Stokes was great. He had a great story about coaching Tim Duncan in college. People know that name, former NBA All-Star Tim Duncan. But then from there, we were able to kind of build that and use that as, all right, what's our next guest we can get on? And we eventually got Adrian Myers, who was then the track and field coach at Northern Illinois. We got Trisha Cullop, who was then the head women's basketball coach at Toledo. And we got Mike Fleck, the still current Ball State men's golf coach. And that was all pretty much in 3 or 4 straight months, getting different coaches on. So we started to build a little bit of credit, a little bit of legitimacy with the schools, with these coaches. And I think for me, that was kind of one of the big memories. The other big memories is all the travel I did. And a lot of it was out of pocket, but it was one of those things. I got to see every MAC stadium. I got to see several Big Ten stadiums and a couple SEC stadiums as the podcast. And for me, I think that was such a cool thing. And again, just kind of adding another layer of legitimacy, because the way kind of some of those credentials work is if you're part of the guest media, the school has to say, yeah, these guys are legit. You can go ahead and approve them. This is our media list. So you have to really have that credibility and have that standing with each university that you work with. and they were great. They gave us a great platform, a great opportunity, and soon it was, hey, are you guys going to this game? Hey, are you going to be at this event? Let us know the next game you're going to be at. So that for me, I think probably the first guest, and then of course all the travel that I've got to do.
Yeah. So I remember in because I watched your last episode of the Max Sports Connection podcast that you got degrees at both Toledo and Ohio University. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I have an undergrad from Toledo. I'm in my final semester of my master's in sports administration at Ohio right now.
Okay. So considering that experience of both those universities, what are some of the things that you take away from those experiences, especially for sporting events for both Toledo and Ohio University?
So one of the things that I look back on, people don't realize how special those venues are. The Glass Bowl, I think you could very much argue, is the most iconic stadium in the Mid American Conference. Whereas the Convocation Center in Athens is uh, is I think the best basketball arena in the Mid American Conference. They're two great places. Peden Stadium, one of the oldest college football stadiums in the state of Ohio. It's when it's packed, that place is an electric factory. It's truly special what they've done at Peden Stadium and now Frank Solich Field, the incredible win streak that they're on at home. But I think I look back on those times, and people are very quick to dismiss mid major athletics and dismiss maybe perhaps even the Mid American Conference specifically. But I think if you give it a shot, these schools are right in your backyard. It's not where you go to an Ohio State game, which you're always going to have a great time. I don't want to disparage any Ohio State fans. You're always going to have a great time, but you're going to have a pretty great time going to a Toledo game or to an Ohio game or any of the schools in the MAC for literally a fraction of the cost. You can get season tickets to a Toledo game for about 120. That's the cost of one ticket for an Ohio State game. Yeah, and so I strongly encourage people to visit those venues, to check those out because they're staples. They are iconic venues. And yeah, from my time with athletics at both, I think it's fun to kind of get to see high quality play at a much smaller scale. That's a little bit closer to the action. And I think that's something that people should definitely check out.
Yeah. So sticking with the Mid American Conference, the MAC, you did mention this in your last episode in early January, but also we could mention it here. What are some of your favorite moments in MAC sports, the sporting events that you attended? No particular order, but what are some that just come to your mind?
I'll just go off of the one I use on the episode. Graham and I were at the Cincinnati Toledo game in the Glass Bowl in 2012. Cincinnati came in undefeated, uh, looking to win the Big East at the time, and possibly go on to the BCS. And Toledo derailed their undefeated season by not scoring an offensive touchdown. Guys like Jeremiah Detmer were a critical part to that, banging through a lot of field goals. Bernard Reedy, one of the fastest receivers in the country, returned a kickoff for a touchdown in the second half. And there was a defensive touchdown by the Rockets. So for me, that's probably one of my favorite memories. Another one that was truly iconic was I think it was that same year actually. So I'm dating myself as a former Toledo student, but watching Toledo women's basketball go to the Fabulous Four in the WNIT. So Toledo had won the WNIT the year before in 2011. They were back in the WNIT in 2012, and we had an overtime thriller with Syracuse. That was an incredible game, a lot of fun. Sucks to be on the losing side of it, but to see Savage Arena packed to the brim the way it was pretty special. As far as kind of something from, I guess, the last couple years, I feel like I'm going back 14 years now, and that's a little bit of a time jump. But one of the things from the last couple years was the 32. Um, No, I'm sorry, it wasn't 32. It was Bowling Green Toledo 42-35. Bowling Green pulls off this monumental upset over Toledo in the Glass Bowl on a Tuesday night. It was cold. It was snowy. Place was packed. I hate saying anything good about Bowling Green as a Toledo guy, but I had to give Bowling Green their flowers. Nobody counted them uh, out, or they never counted themselves out. Nobody gave them a chance to win that game, and it was pretty special to kind of be a part of that and to kind of witness that incredible upset. Toledo obviously went on to win the MAC that year, so I was satisfied on that front. But that was a pretty special moment. I got to be at the Ohio Iowa State game a couple years ago. That was electric. Peden Stadium was absolutely rocking, um, and just a low scoring thriller that sent former Toledo coach Matt Campbell back to Iowa with a loss with his Cyclones, and that was a lot of fun. But I could go on for hours about some of the great games, some of the great memories I've had a chance to witness. But every venue has provided some sort of electricity that has been truly a sight to behold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice that you mentioned the rivalry between Toledo and Bowling Green because that is a good part of what makes the MAC special because you have a lot of rivalries, not just one that gets really entertaining, such as what you just mentioned. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So sticking to the podcast, the Mac Sports Connection podcast, considering what you and your co-hosts went through in those years, what would you say it again in no particular order, but what would you say would be like the do's and don'ts of running a podcast? Like for anybody listening to this right now and they're considering wanting to start a podcast, whatever it may be about sports, whatever else, what are some do's and don'ts that you would have for them?
Biggest thing I can say is be open to criticism. Yeah, it's something that you have to learn as a podcaster, as somebody who's in sports media in any sense. Uh, Criticism comes. It's going to happen. You're going to be part of it. You're going to receive it. Um, and to not be afraid to receive that. Uh, Now the important thing is to remember that if you're speaking an opinion, you're allowed to have your opinion, but your listeners are also allowed to have an opinion. So I really, really strongly encourage people, don't don't be afraid of criticism. In fact, embrace it. There are people out there who are going to have a million ideas on how you should run your show, and maybe there's a nugget or two out there that's quality. Don't run away from that. Don't dismiss all suggestions and all criticism as somebody just spouting their opinion. Be open to it. Listen to it. The second thing is, I always recommend listening to podcasts that you want to be similar to. So let's say you've got a great sports podcast that you love. um Listen to them, listen to how they do things, listen to how they do interviews, maybe some of the sound effects, some of the noises, some of the whatever. um Find what you like about that show, and then find ways to incorporate that. Some guys really love the Pat McAfee show. That's a great show. I don't have the production budget to do anything like that, but that's a great show and a great example of a great sports podcast. The Josh Pate show, he does a great job. um there, and I know I'm listing off some of the bigger ones, but Sicko's Committee does a great job. Group of Five guys, they're another one that does a great job. And decide if you want to do video or just audio. For us, we opted to just stick with the audio format, and we're okay with that. My mom always said I had a face for radio growing up, so we really leaned into that. um, and you know, just jump in. Don't say, "Oh, I want to try this. I want to try this." If you can get a microphone and the ability to record, and then the ability to post, go for it. Jump in, find what you want to talk about. Every single rep counts. You're gonna get better over time. Don't think you won't. Um, so I just say, just start. I would go back and listen to our first ever episode, um, and quite often cringe. But it's also a testament to how far we have come since that very first episode 6 years ago, to where we ended the show just a couple weeks ago. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And I would just basically say that it is a learning experience. You do have to have this trial and error kind of period of
Yeah.
time where you try something out, and then when you realize like a few episodes in it's not working, then that's when you have to like change it up a little bit so that it's more presentable. So
Absolutely.
I mean, and I can attest to that. I could tell you right now, Alex, that I've done that quite a few times on my channel alone. So I would understand that.
Absolutely.
So, so sticking to podcasts, what we just talked about, and also tying this back in with the Mac, because you and I both noticed that when we search up on YouTube for like any Mac shows, like run by Mac fans, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of content there. There may be like a few here and there. I'm closely like associated with friends with Ball State of the Union. That's a
Mhm.
Ball State podcast. Those
Yep.
guys are great.
Yeah.
But the fact is there's just not many of us doing this.
No.
So with that in mind, and here's the question I'm going to be asking. Um, what do you think Mac fans in particular can do to not only raise the profile of what's going on with Mac sports, but if they're wanting to start their own podcast, what specifically do Mac fans need to do, in your opinion?
Research. Attend games.
Right.
That's the first one. You want to raise the profile. You got to get people interested. So you got to be at events. You gotta know what you're looking at, what you're talking about. But then after that, you've got to be there. You got to know what you're talking about. Do your research. Um, Talk to other fans. Hey, what do you see? What do you think? Um, and you mentioned the Ball State of the Union.
Mhm.
You're right; those guys do a great job. Don't be afraid to just try something. They very specifically focused on football first, and they've done a great job with that. Now they're kind of transitioning a little bit into basketball, but you know, stick to something small and then grow it. It's not going to be perfect, um, and anybody who's ever been in this space knows that. But find what works for you. Find what you love to talk about. Something that you wake up and you're like, man, I want to talk about Miami, Ohio football. I want to talk about Buffalo basketball. Whatever it is, and really, really dive into that. What's nice is in kind of a space that doesn't have a lot of people doing it, you can be the best one for your school out there. Now, I would challenge you to make sure that you continue to elevate that profile, but there's a legitimate chance that you doing it, you're the only one for your school doing it. So therefore, people are going to come to you just because they're like, we are starved for information. We want to know more about Ball State field hockey. We want to know more about Western Michigan football. People are going to come to what they see. And as long as the product is good and as long as the product is knowledgeable, people will keep coming back.
Right. And I mentioned that because, like I said, I search on YouTube for any like new Mac related podcasts, and of course, there's like nothing yet materializing from fan bases like, for example, Akron, Kent State, UMass, Eastern Michigan, those places. So when you guys are listening to this right now, I encourage you guys, if you're around those markets, feel free to start experimenting with your own podcast, because this is really a valuable experience for you guys.
Mhm.
So yeah, so sticking with the Mac, going on to the next question, sticking with the Mac, we talked about this a little bit back on Bobcat Corner episode 74, but we might as well talk a little bit more about this. Alex, what are your thoughts on the Mac as far as like the last few years are concerned? As far as like how they're structured, the business side of things with the Mac, what are your thoughts on that? And what does the future kind of look like, in your opinion?
I think the future has the potential to be very positive. We're going to see a massive reshuffling of conferences probably around 2031. Um, Where that puts the MAC, I'm not entirely sure. I think the MAC is at a crossroads. Uh, Expand and live or stay stagnant. And I think right now, probably die. I know that there was reported interest from, I believe, the Sun Belt for Ohio University. We just saw Northern Illinois go out to the Mountain West. And Toledo was kind of mentioned in that as a potential move. So the MAC, I think right now, there is an opportunity to really move forward. Um, but I think you got to be very, very big in being a player in the reshuffle. Um, a couple years ago, there was talk about Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee joining the conference. That never really materialized. But I think moves like that would be what benefits the Mid American Conference. You get established programs who have uh, been at this level for longer than 5 minutes. Looking at you, Kennesaw State. You got to make sure that you find teams that fit the academic profile, fit the athletic profile. And I think both Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky do that. I also think the MAC, for as much as I try to avoid criticism, I think the MAC missed an opportunity. There's a great opportunity to bring in Delaware as a travel partner for UMass, and they didn't do it. So I think that was a massive missed opportunity. So I think right now, if we're trying to really expand into that Northeast corridor, you've got to find the right teams to kind of do that expansion. So um, that for me seems to be the direction the conference has to go. Um, I do think also you've got to be very much aware that you've got TV right deals that are expiring. The max deal expires next year. You got to be aggressive in negotiations. And I'd say maybe don't even just stick with ESPN. I think you put a feeler out to Fox. You put a feeler out to, a couple of these other networks, CBS, or even like Time Warner or CW, whatever it may be. You find a different partner and then you negotiate against each other. Because that's going to be how the MAC can, one, get more money, get more potential viewerships. Um, and then two, there's an opportunity for further growth with a different kind of market. We all know that ESPN is very focused on the SEC and the whole college football playoff. Like we watch them all the time, literally talk during midweek broadcast about the playoffs. They're not even focused on the game. And I get it, the selection shows going on during that, whatnot, but we need to have something that's not that focused, that's interrupting the product of the Mid American Conference, especially during football season. But also, we've got to understand that we've got to get people excited. It's awesome when we have Western Michigan finish the season 10-4, but those four losses aren't ideal. The losses to the Michigan State, who ended up being terrible this year. You don't raise the profile of the league when you're losing to a bottom dweller of the Big Ten. Um, you saw Miami, Ohio, lose a close one to Wisconsin, who finished at the bottom of the Big Ten. We watched Ohio go to a field goal loss at Rutgers, who finished in the bottom half of the Big Ten. Like you've got to start flipping a few more of those games in your favor. Toledo lost a one-score game on the road at Kentucky. Those games can't be losses if you're trying to elevate the profile of the league. In fact, more of those games need to be wins than they are losses.
Right. So I mentioned that because I have been trying my best to evaluate where the MAC is, and especially looking at MACtion, midweek MACtion. We hear a bunch of good stories about MACtion, don't get me wrong. But in your opinion, Alex, this is my next question, I guess. In your opinion, Alex, do you think midweek MACtion is long-term sustainable for the MAC to do? Because I've heard reports that midweek MACtion attendance for games and things like that, they have not been doing all that great when it comes to making money.
Midweek action is so tough. On one hand, it's a great opportunity to be the only show on TV. So you can actually get viewers from across the country. But I think what has happened is it's since evolved into less viewers because they're interested in the sport and more viewers because they're interested in, hey, it's football for me to place bets on. Um, and I think that's where the delicate line has kind of been crossed. Um, there's an argument. Well, why don't they just play on Friday nights or Saturday nights in November? Um, Look, that it's cold regardless. It's November. You expect that it's going to be cold. Um, if you're in a big city like Toledo, who has 300,000 people, i- i- there's no excuse that the Glass Bowl can't be full on a Tuesday night. Sure, maybe not as many kids, but those college kids should be packing that student section. Um, I had professors in college who um, were a lot more understanding of missing class on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night because of the game. Um, and that's just the nature of it. Like, don't if you're a student, you get 4 years, 5 years maybe to get a chance to attend those games. Attend those games. Now, on the other hand, again, as I mentioned, the gambling aspect, I do think that the gambling aspect of it plays a role into why midweek MACtion stays in the midweek. Um, and again, it's more eyes, more gambling, whatever. But I think that we have to be very cautious and say maybe this isn't the move anymore. Now, I think the numbers kind of prove that you get pretty decent viewership in the middle of the week, but at what cost? I mean, the stadiums, for all intents and purposes, look bad on a Tuesday night when there's a reported attendance of 10,000, but it looks like maybe 2,000 people are there. Um, so I have a problem with that. I think that football should be played in front of a full stand. Should be played with people there live because you lose part of it too is you lose a little bit of that home field advantage when you play in front of a crowd of 4,000 people. And you've got these big MAC stadiums, some bigger than others, but you've got these big MAC stadiums that feel very empty on a November 12th on a Tuesday night, and there's almost more camera crew people there than there are fans. I think that's a massive issue. So you got to find that balance. I think the MAC would be better served to maybe do midweek MACtion in October for those who want to focus on the weather issue. But also, I think that its novelty is kind of worn off. I think we're pretty much in the twilight of midweek MACtion, and I'm okay with that. Put it back on a Friday night or Saturday night, and I think that would be a lot better for the product in the long haul.
Yeah, I find myself really agreeing with you, Alex, about that because, I mean, yes, at first it started off okay with midweek MACtion being a novelty, but then recently, as I mentioned, I look at the stats, I look at the economic figures of it all, and it's not translating.
Yeah.
So if something's not working along those lines, then I'm hoping that Mac leadership will look at that and go, yeah, we have to change it up schedule wise when it comes to this. So hopefully that will be addressed in these coming years. And also going back to the media rights deal, yes, I hope that the Mac will look at other networks to partner with, not just ESPN, uh, Fox, CW, you name it.
Mhm.
I would like for that to be at least a consideration for the Mac
Yeah.
because we have to change things up. So going on, and this will be the last question before we
Okay.
start wrapping things up. This is probably a broad question because so many of us in the college football community are asking this kind of question. But I want to ask you this, Alex. What does the future of college football and college sports look like, in your opinion? Where do you see all this going, considering the transfer portal, NIL, revenue sharing, governance, all of that? Where do you see it going within these next few years?
I think it's all gonna blow up. Um, right now, you've got not very many, but you get a select few guys who are making more money than some NFL rookies right now. Um, Bryce Underwood at Michigan. making millions upon millions as a fresh out of high school kid. Um, and I think that's where the issue kind of is. We continue to pump this machine and say, "Hey, we need to pay these kids. We need to," and I'm all for revenue sharing. I'm all for college athletes getting paid. I do not hear that. But I think there we open the floodgates with all of this without any sort of checks and balances. We said, all right, open season transfer portal. All right, open season NIL deals. All right, open season, all these other things. And it's unsustainable. You know, the NFL, they have rosters of 53 guys plus practice players. College football, you're allowing up to what I think 120 scholarships now. Like, so it's more than double, and there are a lot more than 32 teams just at the FBS level alone. There are over 960 colleges across all of the NCAA divisions, and most of them in D1 and then D2 are starting to dive into this NIL thing. D3 a little bit, but that's a lot of money that moves very quickly, and I don't think it's sustainable. I think the other thing that I think we're going to probably eventually see happen is, as much as I hate it, we're probably going to see another D1 divisional split. And perhaps it's a reclassification. Maybe it's not a full real split, but perhaps it's a reclassification where FCS kind of recollects a couple teams. Teams like North Dakota State move up, and maybe an Akron or a Kent State moves down. But I think that we're going to see a full reshuffling of alignment, and universities are going to start to be honest with themselves. Now you've got more money in this NIL thing. Does it make sense to continue to fuel this football machine? Does it continue to make sense? So you're going to see a lot of that happen. But then I also think, lastly, you're going to see a bunch of colleges start to close or start to trim out other sports just so that they continue to fuel X, Y, and Z. And I don't think that's sustainable. So it's just, I think college athletics is going in the wrong direction. I think private equity will play a hand in it at some point, probably sooner than later. But overall, it's going in the wrong direction, in my opinion, and that's where I'm getting a little bit concerned.
Yeah, there's got to be more guardrails put in place when it comes to stuff like this, because we've been hearing lately about transfer portal related issues, and it's kind of mind boggling, to be honest
It
with
is.
you. Just that alone, transfer portal with stuff going on with what's his name, that Washington quarterback. He just signed a contract, and the very next day he pulls out of it, goes to the transfer portal.
Hmm.
It makes you go, what are we doing exactly?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that is like one of many issues that college sports, the governance, they have to address at some
Hmm.
point. So, yes, so I'm hoping that we have a brighter future than what you and I both are thinking right now. So, yeah. Anyway, Alex Scheer, thank you so much for being my special guest on this show. And by the way, guys, I will link in the description box below both the channel itself, the Mac Sports Connection podcast channel itself, and the last episode, so you guys can go back and just re-listen to all those episodes. It's great stuff, guys. I highly encourage you to just go back and re-listen to them, even the older ones. Especially if you guys are wanting to start your own podcast and you want to get ideas as to what you want to do for your own podcast. It's great stuff. I highly recommend it. And again, it will be in the description box below this video. Alex, from me to you, I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for that podcast, the Mac Sports Connection podcast. Yours is like one of many that have inspired people like me to start doing what I do. And I do thank you, Alex, sincerely for what you've done for the college football community, especially the Mac fan community.
Well, Stephen, thank you. It is a labor of love, and that's why we do it. We want to give people the opportunity to voice their support for their school and give them a platform to do so. So that's exactly why we did it, and it was a great run, and it brings me a lot of joy to know that people are inspired to kind of start their own shows and to continue their own shows, talking about their schools. You do a great job with Ohio, and I really appreciate that. As one Bobcat to another, that's it's always fun to take in more Ohio U content. So thank you for the work that you've done. It's been really fun.
Yep. And so with that, guys, we would like to thank you again for listening to this, and we will be back with more interview related content. This has been Stephen Interviews You, episode number 21. We'll be back soon enough. Take care, guys.